We are back with another episode of the Kings of Tennessee podcast. It's been a couple weeks. Uh, the last time you heard from us, we were getting ready for the playoffs, and boy, Billy, they did not disappoint. I'm Chase Brown. I'm joined always, as I just mentioned, by my great co-host Billy Derrick. Billy, how was your playoff slash national championship experience?
It was awesome. I mean, that had to have been. I know everybody likes to say that was the best playoff. I don't know if I say that, but it was up there. I mean, the semifinal games were unbelievable. The first game, Alabama Michigan, felt like. I mean, it felt like a Super Bowl. Like that setting, the Michigan Alabama, history of those two teams, Saban versus Harbaugh. Alabama played horribly, but they still, they were still in it, and Michigan won it on the last play. I thought Michigan, I mean, they're playing with fire there. They could have they could have lost that game and we would have been talking differently and maybe even talking about an Alabama national title. And I know we're going to get to this later, but Nick Saban kind of riding out into the sunset, but it didn't happen. And I thought that was the best coaching job Nick Saban's ever had. I know we've heard a lot about that. And Chase, I mean, to be honest, Alabama had as good of a season as I think they possibly could have had. I mean, Saban squeezed everything out of this team, and it was just, it was unbelievable to see them actually get to the playoff, beat Georgia in the SEC title. Obviously, you play Michigan, you don't beat them, but you kind of muddy the game up, and it was a spectacle. That Alabama Michigan game at the Rose Bowl, that setting, that is college football. Like that. That's why I think a lot of us love this sport so much. So that was phenomenal. And then you have to kind of get back up again for a totally new style of game for Washington and Texas. And honestly, Chase, again, same thing with Alabama. Texas did not play very well. I know they did a good job getting back in the game late, and had a chance to win it there. But I just I thought Sark and Ewers just kind of faltered down the stretch there, especially on that last possession. I didn't understand a lot of those play calls. And Greg McElroy on the broadcast was saying double post, double post, double post, and they they just couldn't. I don't know that they had the right composure for the moment. Texas hasn't been in the playoff in its inception. I know they played in national titles, but those were under Mac Brown, and now sarcasm to the top. Now they gotta kind of settle down. I thought they were potentially the better team, and they kind of showed how dangerous they were, late in that game. But Washington held strong. Credit to them. Michael Penix is unbelievable. But it just wasn't enough in the national title for Washington. Michigan, I thought, I think for me, Chase, I think a lot of people wanted to see Washington win. Penix is too good. Those receivers are too good. Their defense is better than you think. Their offensive line played really well against Texas. I think what Washington did against Texas was almost more, and nothing against Washington and what they did against Texas. I almost think that was more about Texas and what they didn't do. Their defense, their secondary. I know their secondary is not very good. They could have played better. And so I think we kind of got tricked a little bit in our mind about how maybe how elite Washington is, and if they even are elite. They had a great season, but they were not a match for Michigan. And I just wonder, would Texas have been a match if they won? And we'll see. But again, I thought it wasn't an awful national title. I know Michigan kind of handled them, especially late in that game. But I'm just glad it wasn't 63-7, like Georgia, um, you know, and TCU last year. But yeah, Chase, it was great. I thought the playoff was awesome. I really wasn't as locked in to Washington, Texas. I mean, I watched like the first quarter, and then I think I might have felt fallen asleep for a little bit. I wasn't as locked into Washington, Texas. I remember watching the very end of it, kind of trying to get back in and watch it. It was so late. But yeah, amazing playoff, and it's weird with the season being over. It's always a weird feeling when you're a big time college football fan.
Yeah, it is. It's different, especially now that we have to wait 8 months. But I thought the Alabama Michigan game was incredible. I know people want to say, "Oh, it's very sloppy in the first half, so it can't be entertaining." I still think sloppy football can be very entertaining. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that showed a lot in
Yeah,
the Rose Bowl game.
there's a difference. There's a difference between a clean game and a good game. Like, well, I think you can be both. It doesn't have to be a clean game, like you said, to be a
Mhm.
good, entertaining game.
Yeah.
Like it was a good, entertaining slugfest. Like, I mean, how many times have you seen that in the NFL? I think now we get so distracted with they're not scoring points. We got turnovers everywhere. This is an awful game. But it's Alabama, Michigan, the Rose Bowl. You're still going to watch it. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
I think that's where my love of college football is way better, way higher than the NFL because it's kids, so you're gonna get a sloppy game, and that's what makes it fun. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, in that Texas game, I was kind of the same way as you. I was watching the game, but I wasn't focused on the game. I was on my phone or
Yeah,
doing other things, and
yeah,
then so I had Texas winning that game. Like I had the Michigan over, which was the sweat of my life, and it was the most fun bet I've ever hit. And then I had Texas. Um, and Washington basically tried everything they could to let Texas back in. I know the injury at the end of the game was kind of tough. And that stopped the clock, but
yeah.
Quinn Ewers really disappointed me. For a guy that has a lot of talk about him NFL wise and college football wise as being one of the top guys, that last drive was he made a couple good passes to get down there, but as soon as they got inside the 25-yard line in the red zone, it was just downhill. I mean, he hits a swing pass with like 15 seconds left for like 1 yard, and you
Yeah.
can't hit that pass. Now, throwing the ball out of bounds, Colt McCoy style at the very end, avoiding a sack was cool, but the swing pass decision, in my opinion, kind of killed it. Once I saw that, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of it." And the last throw he threw to Adonai Mitchell, he threw it way out of bounds. Adonai Mitchell had beaten that cornerback and had inside position on him. All Ewers had to do was throw a low ball, and he decided to float it out of bounds. Um, so that was kind of disappointing to me. It's kind of, I mean, he hit his head kind of hard, and they were showing Arch on the sideline. How great of a story would that have been?
Oh my gosh,
Arch
that would have
coming
been
in,
unbelievable.
leading Texas to a national title. That would have been the kickoff to a Cinderella story and just a great career for Arch. And now I know we had talked about Ewers had said that he was coming back, and now before this game, it's up in the air. So this is a weird kind of quarterback situation that we will have to watch throughout the offseason, which add that to another storyline we have to watch this offseason. Um, but yeah, I thought it was fun. And just to paint the picture a little bit, let's get into the Natty for just a minute. Michigan defeats Washington 34-13. Blake Corum wins offensive MVP. He looked great. He looked great in the Rose Bowl. He looked great in the national title game. And Billy, I think right before that Washington game, I know I had a lot of people telling me that Washington, their offense was too good, and they were just going to
Yeah,
light Michigan up. But I think after watching Alabama, that Michigan defense is probably the best defense in the country. And they really flexed their
yeah.
muscle these last two games. I think they only gave up 10 points a game this year, and no opponent scored over 25 on them this season. Which is
They
incredible.
got yeah, they got some dudes, man. I mean, just freaks everywhere. I mean, I didn't know that. Like I've watched Michigan, but for some reason that didn't stand like all their freaks on defense didn't stand out to me before. Um, I don't know. I watched the Ohio State game, and I guess because I didn't watch a ton of their games before, I just wasn't as locked in, and I guess studied on their team. But I couldn't believe it. I mean, they're like three deep with freak edge rushers, up front. I mean that was the Georgia type. No one's talking about it. Well, people are complimenting that defense, but Chase, I think that defense might be as good as that Georgia, the Georgia defense, a couple of years ago. I'd probably get some pushback on that, but man, I mean, their secondary, just long, physical, Sainer still NFL corner. I mean, what's the guy 55 up front, Graham, I think,
Yeah,
is unreal. I
and he's
mean,
back next year too.
yeah, I mean they're gonna be good again. They're gonna be elite again, and I think that's not what won them the game. I thought their running game, I mean, 2 touchdowns apiece from the two backs. I mean, that's pretty incredible. It doesn't happen very often. And I thought JJ McCarthy, again, just did what he had to do. Yeah, he ran the ball more than he usually does, and I think that was a little bit of a difference in the game. Um, I thought that going back to halftime, right out of the half, Penix throws the interception, and that felt like, there's certain plays chasing games where it just takes the air out. Like that definitely for the fans in that building of Washington, that had to have taken the air out. I think it did on their sideline. I mean, they were like, "Oh no!" Like, and you can't blame Penix. Penix was on his back all game. Um, he didn't play particularly well, but he was rushed, he was hurried, and you can't really put a ton of blame on him. I mean, that throw in the end zone was incredible, to make it a touchdown game. And in the third quarter, for most of that third quarter, it was a game. Again, it was kind of boring. They're just kind of trading punts, but it was clean football. I think both teams are really good. Those were the two best teams in the country. Michigan was just more physical up front defensively. And I think, that and then up front offensively. I mean, the line of scrimmage, they won the game, the line of scrimmage with Corum, Edwards. I mean, Edwards, how about Edwards there at the very beginning? A couple of touchdowns, 40-plus-yard touchdowns. I think Michigan did way too much at the beginning for Washington to ever really get to a point where they're like, okay, we're right back in it. I think, even when they were down a touchdown, I just kind of felt like, man, it's going to be tough to tie it. That just scoring that one time, to make it 17-10. I thought, man, that was everything was hard. Everything was way too hard for Washington. Um, you know, Again, it wasn't the best game to watch. By the fourth quarter, you kind of knew what was going to happen. And I think most of the day, like I felt like Michigan's gonna win. I just kind of flipped for me. Like up until Monday, I was like, I want Washington to win. Washington's hot. I think Washington might win. And then Monday, wake up, yeah, Michigan's winning this game. Just kind of felt a little bit like last year with Georgia TCU. Washington a little bit better than TCU. Um, but yeah, credit to Michigan. Unbelievable what Harbaugh did. You know, with all the distractions and keeping them focused. He said we're innocent, and obviously that's probably up for debate as well. But I think it was an unbelievable run, first national title in 26 years, so they haven't been there in a while. But yeah, Chase, it was a great run for Michigan, and at the end of the day, they probably won't win another Natty for a while because Harbaugh is probably leaving, and they're going to lose McCarthy. You would think, of course, and then I think Corum and Edwards are both gone. Still have that defense, so they'll still be good. But this is a hell of a moment for Michigan. But yeah, it wasn't the best game.
I'll give you 2 quick points. I think Michigan turned that game into a Big Ten game. I had thought that kind of late, the way they were kind of strangling and the punts, trading back and forth punts. You're kind of sitting there like, man, are we watching Michigan, Iowa, Michigan, Penn State? And I think that was their game plan all along. That game looked like it was going to get out of hand with Donovan Edwards
Yeah,
too ripped off those runs. I thought Penix looked very shook. Even when he wasn't pressured, you can kind of tell he was pressured
yeah,
late in the game. And he kept getting hit. That's the most hit. That's the most he's been hit all year. Even to see him get sacked, he's been great at avoiding sacks. He showed it off against Texas. Texas got pressure, and he just got away from it. Um, but yeah, credit to the Michigan defense. Most of those guys come back next year. I'm kind of on the opinion. I think JJ comes back, and Donovan Edwards, I think, comes back too because I think Edwards is going to be a middle round pick, and I think they can offer him enough NIL money to keep him one more year. McCarthy, I don't know. I think he needs one more year. Uh, I
yeah.
I
I
think
just
that
I
would
just
be
hadn't
smart
I
for
hadn't
him.
heard anything.
Yeah, there's not I don't think there's been anything said on him. I think it's kind of 50-50 right now. Like I think it's a deadlock 50-50 too. Like either can
Okay.
happen. Um, but if those guys come back, I think Michigan is. I think they
Yeah.
win the Big Ten anyway without those guys because I think Sharon Moore steps in and he's been comfortable with this team already. He's shown that he can win as a head coach this season. Um, so I think this team is going to be back next year in the playoffs. I don't think they win a title, but I think they'll be back. But yeah,
Yeah.
credit to
No,
Michigan.
yeah, I'm with you. I think Sharon Moore, and his familiarity, like you said, they're still gonna be really good. But without Harbaugh, do they have that edge? Do they have that same like was Harbaugh, kind of the what took them over the edge,
Yeah,
after so many years of kind of faltering late. So it'll
yeah,
be interesting to see them without Harbaugh. Can they still be a national title contender? They might be in the playoff. Now we
yeah.
got to think, okay, they're in the playoff. Doesn't mean you're a national title contender anymore,
Mhm.
really. You. So
Yeah,
now we're
there's
talking 12-team playoff.
yeah, there's a bigger road to get there now. But winning the Big Ten would solidify a bye. So that I think that's where conference titles are going to be a lot bigger now. And I know a lot of people want to say, well, 12 team diminishes conference titles. Well, no, if you win a conference title, you get a bye, and that's going to be huge. You don't
Yeah.
have to play one less team. But
So
yeah,
the
I'm
four
interested.
the four conference champs get buys.
Yeah,
Got
and
it.
then um they have an they were talking about five conference titles, five conference champions make it, and the rest at large. But now they're wanting to do 6-6. So I'm very excited to see how this playoff is by the time we start the season. I'm excited to see what McCarthy, Edwards, and Harbaugh all three do because there's just not much going on in the Michigan household that we've heard about yet. Um, but Billy, real quick, give me one way, way, way early title prediction next year. Give me a pick.
Whew, that's a good question. Um, hmm. Man, Texas is so talented. I really like Texas, and I, I was gonna potentially say Oregon because kind of the revenge type season. Had a really good year this year. They just didn't have quite enough. But we'll get to this later. I'll kind of tease that. I I want to go Georgia, but man, it's tough because now in this era, you just don't know, like how good are these transfers going to be, Um, Florida State is kind of trendy. I know is Jordan Travis will not be coming back. Um,
No, I think
yeah,
he's going to the NFL.
DJU. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna cop out Georgia. I think after this season they'll be motivated. They got Carson Beck coming back. They got a ton of elite transfers. For ETN, man. I mean that's
Yeah,
unfair. So
that's
I said that the other day to somebody. I said Georgia's gonna win it all. Um, I just I think they get back to a title, and they win it. But I could see Texas winning. I could see potentially Florida State. I know their quarterback's DJU, but it kind of feels like more of a gap year for them. Um, Oregon potentially. I know Dan Lanning has some hype for Alabama. We'll get to that. Um, Alabama. Do I switch that Oregon to pick to Alabama? Who knows? Ole Miss. Ole Miss. I think it's hard to pick them to win it, but man, I mean, they got a super team right now. So yeah, I'll go Georgia right now.
I'm really glad you mentioned that last team because I'm drinking something this morning, and you could consider it Kool-Aid. Uh, I've kind of been drinking this Kool-Aid for a couple weeks now. As a gambler, I love taking value picks, not long shots, but not crazy, crazy favorites. I'm gonna go Ole Miss. I've bought in to Lane Kiffin. I know I have family there. But I've bought into Lane Kiffin. I've bought into this transfer portal team. Now, again, you teased this just a second ago with Dan Lanning. So I'm gonna also tease it with the Mad Hatter, the new Mad Hatter Lane Kiffin. But that defense is ridiculous. I mean, that front line is Tyler Barron, Walter Nolan, JJ Puguis.
Mm.
I mean, that defense is monstrous. And Jackson Dart looked incredible to me in that Peach Bowl game. Quinshon Judkins is gone, but they have backs already in place, and you add Juice Wells to an offense that was pretty solid last year. Yeah,
They
that
got
team is
Logan Diggs
scary. Yeah,
from LSU.
yep. Yeah, that team is. So that's my pick. Ole Miss is my early pick, and I think that's going to be my pick up until really the season, I think. Unless something happens at Alabama, I'm interested to see that. But enough teasing. Billy, I think we had a boring Wednesday yesterday. I don't not really not
Yeah.
much happened.
I don't
Um,
think much went on, really.
no, I think this coach retired. Uh, what was this,
Yeah.
Saban?
Yeah. Like
So
Nick, maybe.
yeah, Nick, something like that. Saint Nick. I don't know. Just Nick. Anywho, this is the craziest news I think we could have ever expected. I'm gonna say it. I don't like Alabama. Oh, we know this. But Nick Saban, I have such an admiration for Nick Saban. It's ridiculous. I know a lot of people are like one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. He is the greatest college football coach of all time. Decides to call it a career, shockingly. We kind of expected it coming soon, but not this year. I think 1 or 2 years was kind of the window that we had set. I think that everyone had set for him. And now he's gone just out of nowhere. Just drops a bombshell on a Wednesday afternoon. Um, so yeah, Alabama doesn't have a head coach for the first time in 17 years. Uh, and that dynasty, is it dead, Billy?
Oh man. I mean, Saban's gone. You can't really say, oh, Alabama's still a dynasty, even though Saban's gone. It's kind of stupid. Like, yeah, I mean the Nick Saban dynasty at Alabama is over. Now that doesn't mean they can't, keep this going. Like Nick Saban, I don't think he made this decision without knowing who was taking over. Um, and again, we've been teasing it, but it feels like Dan Lanning is that guy. Um, he's been at Georgia. He's been at Alabama. Is that correct, Chase?
I
Or
think he
is
was
it
in
is it it's just Georgia?
I will find that out real quick for you.
Okay. Either way, he's been under Saban and Kirby Smart. Um, he's hard nosed, tough nosed, guy that is gonna he'll if anybody was to kind of like a carbon copy or prototype, type of guy to follow Nick Saban, it would be Dan Lanning. So I think he knew, okay, they've got the guy in place. I'll retire. I'll kind of try to make it as easy as possible. It was never not going to be a shock or surprising. Um, but the fact that he did, it kind of makes you think about everything he did at Alabama. I thought it was interesting in the statement that he put out, or Alabama put out from Saban. He said, "We always tried to do it the right way. The goal was always to help players create more value for their future." So Saban, I think that kind of gets lost. He did it the right way. He's old fashioned, um, and I love that about him. In 17 years, he won 201 games, tied with Vince Dooley for the second most wins at a single school in SEC history. He made the college football playoff 8 out of the 10 years the playoff existed. The 4 team existed. So yeah, he told the team yesterday. Like I said, Dan Lanning seems to be the leader in the clubhouse, and yeah, you said it, Chase. He's the greatest coach of all time. No one will ever do what Nick Saban did at Alabama anywhere else ever again. Not even. I don't think Kirby Smart will match that type of dominance. I could be wrong, but that level of dominance, especially in this era, he did it. At least the first, I guess 3/4 of his career at Bama. He did it in the non-portal NIL era, but he still won a title in this era. So that tells you how he adapted, how good he is, and it's hard to talk about because he is so great and you hear so many things about him, but you can't quantify it. You can't. It's words can't describe what he did at Alabama. So it's unbelievable, Chase. And of course, Belichick today now moves on as well. And it's kind of it's kind of shift. It's a big shift right now in college football, not just in the SEC, but now the playing field is even more level without a legend. So hats off to him. crazy day yesterday.
That's so wild that those guys were head coach and defensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns, Belichick and Saban.
I know.
Um, yeah. So back to your point, Dan Lanning, it was a graduate assistant in 2015 in Alabama, so that is his tie to the school. I like Dan Lanning. I've liked Dan Lanning a lot at Oregon. I think he's a young guy. I know there's mention of like James Franklin or I see the other names. I'm like, nah, I don't that Mike Norvell is another name. I think Dan Lanning is kind of the younger guy. If you're not going to get Kiffin, who I've always thought Kiffin was the successor to Saban, and maybe that's not happening because it came a little earlier than Alabama and Kiffin expected. So, I think he probably just winds up staying in Ole Miss and trying to build his own version of Alabama there. But I like Dan Lanning a lot. I think he's a great motivator. He's a great coach. He's a young guy, so if he does have success, he'll be there for a long time. Um,
Yeah, let me ask you this, Chase,
uh
real quick. Do you think Lane Kiffin had a feeling Saban was going to retire and has been telling a lot of these portal guys, hey, the West is ours next year. Saban's not going to be here.
Yeah, I could see that absolutely. Even if he didn't know it was coming this year, I think he's like, we're building something because in a couple of years, that's not going to be a problem.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, because that's part of this. You said even though it was if we didn't know it was going to come here, I think this shocked a lot of people because and it shocked coaches, players on that Alabama team. So Saban apparently, I don't know if he woke up yesterday, a couple of days ago, and just felt it and talked to his wife and said, "Hey, we're doing this." But it is kind of interesting the fact that uh, this wasn't expected. People aren't surprised because I mean the man's 73. He was there 17 years. He won 7 national titles. He's done it all. This wasn't going to end with Alabama going 4-8. And say, "Oh, it's time." He's decided to hang it up, and I just think that's interesting. The way people thought about it was okay. He's going to keep going. I think everybody kind of got to that point, and then now, boom, Saban flips the switch and changes it on everybody. So I think that's kind of interesting.
I think part of it, to me, part of it has to do with how the sport is evolving. And I don't, he's 72, like we've said. I don't blame the man for getting out before the sport gets kind of completely different than what it originally was when he signed this contract with Alabama and started coaching at this school. I mean, in the last 17 years, this sport has completely changed, almost a full
Yeah.
180 in difference with NIL money coming in. I think the sport gets way more different going forward, and I don't think that's a bad thing, in my opinion. I like it. I'm here for it. I still think we get the great action of college football, but I think for these older coaches, maybe they don't want to deal with it. You get young guys like Dan Lanning who are all about evolving with the sport, and they can evolve with the sport. I mean, look at Kiffin. Kiffin is the portal king the last 3 or 4 years. He's doing it consistently, and because he knows he's a young guy, he knows what players want. He knows how to entice you or how to kind of secure your vote of confidence in him. And I think Dan Lanning uh, is the defensive version of Lane Kiffin. Maybe not as flashy as Lane, but in terms of just off the field and age, he's a little younger, but just getting your players up, in the morning and getting them ready to go. I think Dan Lanning is top notch when it comes to that. And I think if they do eventually hire him, I know Alabama last night said they want their next coach to be hired in the next 72 hours, 48 hours now. Um, and I think that means Dan Lanning has already had conversations with them.
Yep.
But now you get Oregon. Oregon's open. I think I told someone this yesterday. This job opening is about to cause another big ruckus because now Oregon's open. Oregon's a big job. I think
Yeah.
Oregon's the biggest job on the West Coast.
Yeah.
You
And
got you.
you wonder it's going to be tough. It's not going to be as easy for Oregon to find a coach as it is now for Alabama, right?
Yeah,
Oregon coach Dan Lanning, we think, we're both predicting is going to be the next Alabama head coach. But for Oregon right now, they've got it tough, man, because I'm sure, let's say they agreed to this, yesterday, and Oregon gets word of it, they're starting their. I mean, they're already talking to candidates, right now, last night even. So it's going to be really interesting how many Oregon players go to Alabama if this, we're talking as if this is happening.
Yeah.
Um, I saw a tweet press conference tomorrow for Lanning potentially. These are all rumors, nothing here
Mhm.
substantial, but uh, yeah, I just think that's interesting with Oregon. Like, how do I think they're going to have a tougher time bouncing back from this, uh, as opposed to Alabama. Oregon's going to be fine. They're going to be fine. But does Dylan Gabriel go to Bama? So there's going to be some dominoes to fall here in the next month or so because Alabama players have the portal open 30 days for another month, just for Alabama players to enter. I don't know. I'll be interested. I think a lot of people think a lot of players are going to enter. I don't know, with Lanning coming in and Saban kind of handing the keys over to him. I saw a tweet today. Saban is back in Tuscaloosa in the facility, so I don't know if he's meeting with Lanning. And you know, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that, man. Saban and
I
Lanning,
I
passing the
I
torch.
I love a good coaching search. And this, I was so excited once this news broke. Not because Saban is trying, but I'm such a weirdo for like coaching searches and like candidates. And when this came up, I was like, oh, we are gonna have a fun couple of days discussing who we think it is, who's next, and then it's gonna be fun to see somebody different on the sideline next year. If it is Dan Lanning, that's gonna be fun to see. As a
Yeah.
Tennessee fan
Well,
in October.
yeah, and I know we're gonna wrap it up here soon, but it's interesting the timing of this. Like, winter workouts have started at a few programs. Like, I know Vanderbilt has started. Uh, Alabama probably, like Tennessee. A lot of the other SEC schools don't even start classes again for another couple of weeks. So that's kind of where Bama is. I don't know how Oregon is, but this is a little bit later in the process than we're used to. Bama was in the playoff, and so Saban, I think out of respect, he wanted to wait a couple of days after the national title, give Michigan their shine. It's just interesting the timing of it. You got to kind of move quick, and I think both Alabama and Oregon are going to be moving quick.
Yeah, I I agree with you there. And I also agree with you. I don't think that many people are gonna leave. It's Alabama. I get Nick Saban's a big like the big centerpiece for that school and that program. But at the end of the day, it's still Alabama. And their success over the last 17 years is so hard not to ignore. Like you still want to play for Alabama. So yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think that many people leave. If it's not Dan Lanning, Billy, who's your beside which we kind of know he's the favorite. Who would you want, or who's a fun pick that you would like to see if it's not Dan Lanning?
I mean, I think Alabama, their first call was and should have been Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's not going to leave. Georgia, Dabo Sweeney. I know Bama fans don't want Dabo Sweeney. I I don't know. I think he'd be an interesting one. But after Lanning, I can't say Dabo. Franklin. It's kind of hard. Norvell potentially. Um, I just think Lanning is such a good fit. It's hard to come up with somebody else. Um, Dabo would be safe. Like, Dabo, I'm sure knows, he's recruited a lot of those guys, knows, is very familiar with Saban. Um, but yeah, I'll go Dabo, whatever.
I'm gonna give you a fun one that I've seen a couple places. Kalen DeBoer from
Yeah, I saw that
Washington,
one.
because I think Washington loses a lot. They lose their quarterback. They lose basically all their wide receivers, the three NFL guys. They lose their
Hmm.
entire defensive front and both their safeties. They're gonna be fine next year. They're not gonna be what they were this year. I don't think they might squeak into the playoffs. And I think DeBoer has done a great job at Washington. He kind of inherited a not great program and he's turned it around significantly. Now I get that he had incredible wide receivers on Michael Penix in the backfield the last 2 years. But even still, I think he's a great head coach. And I think that would be a fun pick. I think it would be cool. But I think right now it's Dan Lanning and everybody else. I would be
Yeah.
very shocked if it's somebody other than Dan Lanning at this point in the coaching search.
Yeah, I mean, it's Lanning. Lanning's the guy. And I think, like I said, they got to move quick. So, I mean, you're going to see something probably, you know, later this afternoon, tonight, maybe early tomorrow morning, and then it'll probably be announced tomorrow. I mean, I'm just saying what I've seen. Again, I could be totally wrong there, but um, that's what it feels like. Like I said, they got to get moving. So yeah, it's crazy. There's gonna be some more dominoes to fall in here in the next month or so.
It has been a wild couple weeks of football. We've had coaching changes for our NFL teams. And now Nick Saban's gone. We have a national champion. We have 8 months off college football. Um, Before we wrap up, Dan Lanning right now, according to BetOnline, minus 300 to get the job. So that's a big favorite. So it's trending definitely in that way. Um, but yeah, it was a great year of college football. It's officially over. No more games. But now here comes the fun part. Coaching searches, recruiting, transfer portals, and we know EA, we're watching you. How dare you not release a freaking commercial Monday? That's what we waited for. We waited pins and needles. I didn't go get food at halftime because I was waiting for the freaking commercial and you didn't drop it. We know where you are. We know where you're headquartered. We will find you and we will take our game back.
Yeah,
But I
I was watching too. Felt like an idiot waiting for that.
Yeah, whoever started that rumor on Twitter, we're coming after you too. But yeah, I think that's gonna about wrap it up here. We should be back next week. Hopefully next week, by the next time you hear from us, we're gonna have a couple coaching hires. And that'll be so fun to get into. Basketball season is going too. Tennessee, to crap the bed last night against Mississippi State. Vanderbilt still kind of struggling to get off the ground as well. So hopefully basketball is kind of where we turn our attention to now that football has left us. But yeah, I think that's going to about do it. Billy, thank you once again for joining us. And all you Kings of Tennessee out there, I hope you have a great day. And we'll catch you guys next week.